Welcome to the shadow frequency, where the veil between this world and the next grows thin, and the things that whisper in the dark are given voice. From the cryptic candlelit studios, deep in the Indiana forests, your host, Matt Wilson, and his spectral producer, Juniper Ravenwood, unearth the forbidden, the forgotten, and the fearsome. So, still your heart, dim the light, and listen closely. For once you tune into the shadow frequency, you may never tune out.
Welcome back to the Shadow Frequency. I'm Juniper, and tonight the signal is coming through cold, quiet, and just a little too close to home. There are haunted places that announce themselves with broken windows, old cemeteries, and histories soaked in tragedy. And then there are the ones that look perfectly normal from the curb. That's what bothers me about tonight's case. It does not begin in a castle or an abandoned hospital or some lonely house at the end of a dirt road. It begins in Horicon, Wisconsin, with a family, a dream home, and a set of secondhand bunk beds that may have carried something inside with them. Tonight's episode is the Tallman Family Haunting. In 1987, Alan and Debbie Tallman and their children reportedly found themselves trapped in a nightmare that started small, then grew darker. Strange noises, doors moving, a radio changing stations by itself, children seeing things in their room. Then voices, fire-like visions, red eyes, and a presence that seemed to focus on the most vulnerable people in the house. It is part haunted house story, part cursed object story, and part small-town folklore. And it asks a question that is honestly hard to shake. Can something ordinary become a doorway? Chris, will start with you. What do you make of a case where the object seems to be the center of the storm?
June, that's the part that gets me. A house being haunted is one thing, but the idea that you can bring something into your home without knowing what's attached to it, that's properly unsettling. A bunk bed is supposed to be harmless. It's supposed to be where children sleep. That makes the whole thing feel darker.
Exactly. It turns something domestic into something dangerous, and that is very old kind of fear. Matt, what about you? Does the Tallman case feel more like a haunting or more like a cursed object story?
Honestly, June, it feels like both.
Yeah.
The house became the stage, but the bunk beds feels like the thing that opened the curtain. And once that curtain opened, the family could not seem to close it again.
That is a deeply unpleasant way to put it, which means it is perfect for this show. And with that, Matt, let's step into tonight's case.
You are tuned to the shadow frequency, where every whisper tells a story from beyond the veil. Hosted by Matt Wilson. Produced by Juniper Ravenwood. With Chris Beach. The darkness continues.
Thanks, Juniper. And yeah, tonight's case has that particular kind of chill that gets under your skin because it does not begin in some collapsing old mansion with vines crawling up the windows. It begins in Horicon, Wisconsin, in a normal family home with Alan and Debbie Tallman trying to build a good life for their kids. And that's what makes this one land so hard. The Tallmans were not wandering around looking for a legend. They were not chasing seances or poking at cemetery gates at midnight. They were a family in a 3-bedroom ranch house, doing what families do, fixing up rooms, raising children, making plans, believing the walls around them meant safety. And for a while, that is exactly what the house seemed to be. A dream home, a place with routines, work schedules, children sleeping down the hall, lights going off at the end of the night. Then a set of secondhand bunk beds entered the picture, and from that moment on, the story starts to feel like something came home with the furniture. Quiet at first, waiting for the right room to become its doorway. The beds were bought used, meant for the children, and if you've ever carried an old piece of furniture into a house, you know how ordinary that feels. You wipe it down, maybe tighten a few bolts, maybe joke about saving money, and then it just becomes part of the home. But in the Tallman account, the bunk bed did not settle into the house. It seemed to wake something inside it. Early reports described the first disturbances as small, almost easy to dismiss. A radio in the children's room changing stations by itself. Noises in rooms that should have been empty. Doors that moved as though someone had just passed through. The kind of thing a tired parent might explain away once, maybe twice, because nobody wants to believe the children's bedroom has become the center of something intelligent. But the details kept stacking up. And once the children began describing a frightening old woman, dark-haired and terrible, sometimes connected with a glow-like fire, the whole rhythm of the house changed. Suddenly every creak had weight. Every dark doorway felt occupied. Every bedtime became a negotiation with whatever waited in that room. I'm pulling something from the file here, and this is the kind of item that makes a story stop feeling distant. It's a printed image from the later investigation material associated with Dr. Don Mueller's files, one of those interior photographs said to show the Tallman house and the notorious bunk bed after the family had already fled. It is not dramatic in the way a horror movie poster is dramatic. That's the scary part. You look at it and you see a room, a bed, walls, ordinary angles, nothing theatrical. Nothing with claws reaching out from the corner. But if the Tallman account is true, that ordinary-looking space was where children reported visions, where illness and fear gathered, where a family's sense of safety started coming apart night after night. Sometimes the most disturbing evidence is not a monster caught on camera. Sometimes it is a plain photograph of a room where everyone looks at the same bed and quietly wonders what it brought with it. The activity, according to the family's story, did not stay playful or vague. It grew personal. Voices were heard in empty rooms. Furniture moved. A rocking chair was said to move on its own. The children became frightened enough that the adults could not simply shrug it off anymore. And then there was that heavy emotional detail that shows up in so many haunted house cases. The family's fear did not come all at once. It accumulated. One night becomes two. Two becomes a week. A week becomes a season. You begin sleeping lighter. You start listening before you enter a room. You wonder whether the house is quiet because nothing is there or because something is listening back. Reverend Wayne Dobratz reportedly came to bless the home, and in another kind of story, that would be the moment the storm breaks. A prayer, a blessing, a sense of relief. But in the Tallman case, the blessing did not end it. If anything, the presence seemed to remain fixed on the house, fixed on the children, fixed on the bed like it had found its anchor. And then Alan Tallman did what a parent does when fear finally turns into anger. He reportedly challenged whatever was in the house, telling it to pick on him and leave his children alone. Now, in folklore, that's a dangerous thing. You do not call out into the dark unless you are ready for the dark to answer. Soon after, Alan's own encounters became some of the most terrifying parts of the case. There are accounts of a voice near the garage, a fiery orange glow where no fire should have been, eyes in the dark, and later a mist or flame-like presence that seemed to rise inside the home itself. Think about the psychology of that moment, but not from the outside, not as a viewer. Think about it as a father trying to protect his children, only to realize the thing he challenged may have accepted. That moves the case from a haunted object story into something much more intimate. It is no longer just strange noises or a cursed bunk bed. It is a confrontation between a family and something that seems to understand fear. By the time the Tallmans left in January of 1988, the home had become, at least in their telling, unlivable. And that word matters. Unlivable does not mean inconvenient. It does not mean spooky. It means the place where you are supposed to sleep, eat, raise your children, and breathe without thinking has turned against you so completely that leaving in the cold feels safer than staying one more night. The family's departure did not end the story either. Horicon began to whisper. Cars rolled down the street. Rumors grew wild, as rumors always do when a real fear enters a small town and nobody knows where to put it. Bleeding walls, impossible movements, things the family themselves may not have claimed, all blooming around the core of the case like mold around a buried thing. But at the center of it all remains that simple, awful image, a family carrying a used bunk bed into a child's room, never imagining they might be building a place for something else to sleep. And that's where this case really tightens the grip, because once something follows you into the children's room, the whole house stops feeling like home.
That image of the bunk bed is what gets me. It's so ordinary that it becomes worse.
Yeah, I don't like that at all. You buy something used, you think you're saving a few dollars, and suddenly you're wondering what else came with it.
Exactly, and in the second half, we're going to follow what happened after the Tallmans fled, how the town reacted, what investigators found, and why this case still refuses to stay buried. Juniper and Chris, over to you.
The most terrifying hauntings do not always begin in abandoned houses or forgotten cemeteries. Sometimes they start in a child's bedroom with something as ordinary as a used bunk bed.
So far, this one feels like it is crawling out from under the bed and standing quietly in the hallway. And I keep wondering what all of you are thinking right now. Was the bunk bed the source? Was the house already waiting? Or did something attach itself to the family and use that room as its way in? We'll get deeper into that after the break. Chris, take it from here.
Thanks, June. And I'll tell you, this one is properly creepy because it's not some ruined old building out in the middle of nowhere. It's a family home. It's kids trying to sleep. It's a piece of furniture that should have been completely harmless. And that is what makes it so unsettling. If you're enjoying the Shadow Frequency, take a second to like and subscribe on whatever platform you're using. It really does help the algorithms find the show and push these strange little transmissions out to more listeners. You can also find us on Facebook, TikTok, YouTube, Rumble, and all major podcast directories. And be sure to visit shadowfrequencypodcast.com. That's where you'll find all the episodes, the companion blog, merch, show notes, and links to every platform. You can also support the show by buying us a coffee right there on the website. And if you've got a story, a question, or something strange to share, reach out by email or voice message. It may end up on a future episode. June, I'll hand it back to you.
Thanks, Chris. All right, it's time to fire up the Spectral Cosmic Message Materializer. I'm flipping the switches now, warming the coils and letting the static crawl through the copper teeth. Let's see what the old machine calls up tonight. Oh, there we go. A little basement stain transmission just slid out of the slot, still humming at the edges. We'll unfold it carefully and see who's speaking from the shadows. Tonight's message comes from Bill in Indiana, who found us through Facebook and apparently listens in one of the most shadow frequency places possible. It says, "Hey guys, I've been following the show on Facebook for a while now, and I usually put on an episode when I'm down in the basement working on old painting projects. I've got a little radio, a work light, paint cans everywhere, and usually just enough shadow in the corners to make me regret listening to haunting episodes after dark. I'm especially into the hauntings and UFO stories. You bring something home, set it up, and never think twice about where it came from. Keep the basement lights burning. Bill from Indiana." Bill, first of all, painting in the basement while listening to this show is either dedication or a cry for help, and honestly, we appreciate both. If you'd like to send us a message like Bill did, you can email us anytime at shadowpodcast@protonmail.com. Now let's turn it back over to Chris for the Shadow News.
Thanks, June. Bill, I have to say, painting in a basement while listening to this particular show is brave work. I'd be checking behind every paint can by the end of it. A strange little phrase buried in a declassified CIA file is stirring up the Hall of Records mystery all over again. In a 1952 photo inventory tied to Egypt, one entry refers to a temple under Sphinx, and that single line is now fueling fresh speculation that something may still be hidden beneath the monument. But archaeologists have pushed back on ideas like that for years, noting that past surveys around the Sphinx turned up ordinary cracks and fissures, not any lost chamber of ancient secrets. June, I'll send it back to you.
Thanks, Chris, and that is exactly the kind of phrase that keeps ancient mystery people awake at night. One little line, one odd description, and suddenly the Sphinx starts feeling less like a monument and more like a locked door. And that actually fits tonight's case pretty well, because in the Tallman Haunting, one ordinary object becomes the key to a much larger mystery. Matt, let's go back to Horicon, Wisconsin, and follow what happened after the family finally left the house.
The Tallman family thought they had found their dream home in quiet Horicon, Wisconsin. But after the shadows started moving and the voices came from empty rooms, home became the last place they felt safe.
Thanks, Juniper and Bill. Painting in the basement while listening to a haunting episode? That feels brave in a way I do not personally recommend, but I respect the commitment. And Chris, that Hall of Records item is exactly the kind of thing that reminds us how one line in an old file can reopen an entire legend. The Tallman case works the same way. One ordinary detail, a bunk bed, becomes the hinge for everything. When we come back to Horicon after the family leaves, the haunting does not just stay inside the house. It spills into the town. People begin driving by. Neighbors deal with strangers in the yards. The police have to manage curiosity seekers. And suddenly the Tallmans are not only dealing with whatever they believed was inside that home, they are dealing with the public version of it, which is always messier, louder, and much harder to control. A private terror becomes a neighborhood attraction, and that may be the one of the cruelest aftershocks of the haunting. And here's a second item I'm pulling from the file tonight. It's a photocopy of a February 1988 follow-up report about the house going up for sale and the bunk beds being buried in a private landfill. That detail feels almost ritualistic, doesn't it? Not just thrown away, buried. Plowed under somewhere nobody was supposed to find them again. In a practical sense, maybe the family simply wanted the furniture gone. But in folklore terms, burial is containment. You put the object back into the earth, away from hands, away from bedrooms, away from children. And there is something deeply unsettling about the fact that the exact location of those buried beds is not part of the public story. Somewhere in the Horicon area, if the reports are right, the object at the center of one of Wisconsin's strangest hauntings was swallowed by a landfill and left without a marker. That is the kind of ending that does not feel like an ending. It feels like a lid. After the family left, investigators and clergy became part of the story. Reverend Dobrotz had already blessed the home, and later Police Chief Douglas Glaman reportedly helped arrange for outside researchers to examine the property. Dr. Don Mueller's name shows up in connection with that investigation, along with others interested in paranormal or psychic phenomena. Now, what did they find? That is where the Tallman case gets foggy. There are claims of hot spots, photos, impressions, and strong feelings inside the house, but no neat laboratory-style conclusion that ties a bow around the case. And that may be exactly why it has endured. It is not over-explained. It does not hand us a villain with a name and a birth date. We never learn where the bunk bed came from, who owned it before, what history may have been attached to it, or whether the bed was the source, the trigger, or just the thing that gave the house a place to focus. That unknown history is almost worse than a tidy answer, because every secondhand object has a silent life before it reaches you. The mystery stays open, and open mysteries breathe. Now here's the one skeptical angle worth giving some room, because the best eerie cases can survive a little daylight. It is possible that fear, stress, illness, rumor, and ordinary house problems fed into another until the family found themselves in a psychological storm. Some have wondered about environmental causes like gas issues, mold, or other conditions that could affect sleep, perception, or health. Electronics can malfunction. Children can frighten one another. A small-town rumor mill can take a strange family experience and inflate it into bleeding walls and impossible machines. And once a house gets a reputation, every shadow starts auditioning for the role of ghost. Now that matters, but it also does not erase the case, because the Tallmans were described by people close to the situation as a family not chasing fame, not trying to turn the house into a roadside attraction, not eager to be swallowed by reporters. They fled. They hid from attention. They let other people talk because talking about it meant stepping back into it, and that behavior gives the story a different texture. It feels less like a performance and more like people trying to get away from something they could not explain. And when a case has that kind of human texture, the skepticism does not flatten it. It actually sharpens the unease, because either way, something real happened inside that family. That is why the Tallman haunting still has teeth. It sits in the uncomfortable space between cursed object, family haunting, demonic-style oppression, and small-town folklore. Maybe the bunk bed carried something with it. Maybe the house had a dormant presence that the bed somehow disturbed. Maybe the children became the focus because children's rooms are already charged places in the imagination. Safe, vulnerable, full of dreams, full of night fears. Or maybe, just maybe, there are objects that hold more than dust and old varnish. Things pass from hand to hand. things with histories no one asks about because the price is right and the wood still looks sturdy. The Tallmans left the house. The later owners reportedly did not experience the same terror. The beds were buried. The cameras went away. The crowds eventually stopped cruising Larrabee Street. But the story remains because it asks one question that feels too simple and too frightening. What if the most dangerous thing in your house is not hiding in the walls at all? What if you carried it in during the daylight, set it up with your own hands, tightened the bolts yourself, and tucked your children in beside it? For me, that is the lasting chill of the Tallman case. Not that a house might be haunted, but that something ordinary might be waiting for someone to bring it home.
I think that's what makes this one stick. You can laugh off castles and old ruins, but everybody has owned something second-hand. Everybody has brought a stranger's object into their house.
And suddenly every thrift store chair just got a little less charming. Fantastic. Thank you both for that.
At the end of the day, we do not know exactly what happened in Horicon. But we do know this: the Tallman family left their dream home behind, the bunk beds were buried, and the story still feels like it's whispering from the room down the hall. Juniper, take us on home.
What makes the Tallman haunting so disturbing is how ordinary everything looked from the outside. Behind those walls, according to the family, something unseen was watching, waiting, and getting closer.
Tonight, we followed the story of the Tallman Family Haunting, a case that turned an ordinary home in Horicon, Wisconsin, into one of the strangest haunted object legends in modern American folklore. A dream home, a secondhand bunk bed, children seeing something they should never have seen, a family pushed out into the winter night, and somewhere buried out of sight, the object that may have been at the center of it all. Thanks for joining us on The Shadow Frequency. If you've got a story, a theory, a strange experience, or a question for the show, email us, shadowpodcast@protonmail.com. And you can also find everything on our website, shadowfrequencypodcast.com, including episodes, the companion blog, merchandise, show notes, and links to every platform. We'll be back next time with another strange case from the edge of the signal. You guys want to say goodnight?
Good night, everybody. Check the corners before you turn out the lights, and maybe think twice before bringing old furniture into the house after dark.
Good night, everyone. And if you're listening from a basement, a spare room, or anywhere with an old bunk bed nearby, maybe leave one extra light on.
Good night, strange ones. Sleep well, keep your doors closed, and remember, sometimes the thing under the bed is not under there because it crawled in. Sometimes it came home with you.
This episode was conjured with a solemn vow to explore the unexplained while remaining bound to the truths that have been unearthed. All interpretations are speculative and offered only for your enlightenment and your entertainment.